They were right when they said you cannot judge a person by their looks, and in the case of Lorne Armstrong, that couldn't be truer. From just how he looks, he looked like any other ordinary man leading an ordinary life, a close-knit family, a single mother, school, military service, and a blue-collar career. But only as we dig deeper do we discover things darker and deeper than a trench. What follows is a whole lot of online presence on Myspace. A 37-year-old Lorne Armstrong, born in Cambridge, Maine, United States, although from what he seems like, he actually had humble beginnings. Being the youngest of the 5 children, he had 4 brothers and a sister to nurture him besides his mother. However, raising 6 children under one roof was no easy task for his mother, especially because his mother, Gwendolyn Armstrong, commonly known as Mama Gwen, had her problems of her own to handle. She was going through divorces. She gave her best to raise them comfortably, and with the way Lorne Armstrong puts it, she definitely seems to have given her all to provide them a comfortable living and keep them a tight-knit family. According to Lorne, during one of his court sessions, he has publicly asserted that his parents split when he was only 2 years old, and his mother got cheated on by a man with whom she had an almost 3-decade relationship, a relationship that crushed Mama Gwen's heart. Watching his mother suffer during the majority of her life made him see through his mother's vulnerable side and, moreover, create an instinct to put his mother above all others. However, this didn't seem to sit well when he had partners of his own as an adult. Well, if you're wondering what or how he really spoke to one of his alleged partners, here's a brief audio of the phone call that occurred.
She's back, you son of a gorilla.
You called my mother a
I know, and I called you a son of a
and you don't even say you're sorry for calling my mom a
No, I'm not sorry. You're a fucking and your mom's a runs in the family.
Don't ever call her a fucking
Okay, baby.
I have not done that fucking shit to your mother, and your mother was worthless to you. My mother is not worthless to me.
There it is, a potential mama's boy vouching for his mother and putting her above everyone else. To give some context for this phone call, Lorne didn't like Dan, aka his partner, disrespecting his mother, nor did he approve of the male gynecologist or his girlfriend doing drugs. Based on how he talks, he refers to Mama Gwen, popularly known on the internet as Gorilla Gwen, as his wife. And no, that's not just my opinion. Many feel the mother and son's relationship is excessive for what it should be. However, let's not jump to conclusions too quickly, because this is only the tip of the iceberg. One might think, maybe it was his rough childhood that made him like this. Children tend to react differently for different kinds of traumatic events they encounter, although Lorne has admitted that he had a fairly comfortable childhood mostly because of his mother. However, the fact that his father left him at a very early age made him understand how weak and vulnerable some relationships can be. He said that he's often scared of relationships breaking off and separating from his favorite ones. This line also includes how he felt when his siblings also took off to college, which sounds quite fair for what he went through. I call these his humble beginning for this very reason. He grew up having everything but also the same things, leaving him at a tender age, which scarred his juvenile feelings. In the later years, he grew up in Maine. He led a life just like any other high school student, a simple life, trying his best in his classes. He graduated high school in 1989 and still has the nickname 87 for the year, although he wasn't the best performing student in his class. After graduating from high school, he joined the Air Force, and in there he was trained to be a truck mechanic. In one of the newsletters released during the 90s, it was mentioned that he was also a part of the decontamination team. Additionally, he also received a certificate in basic training, diesel mechanics, and technical school. He received an award for voluntary activity as he was a coach for a children's mini-mite basketball team. Service of that kind doesn't just let someone slide without a scar. Lorne broke his right arm and dislocated his wrist during that period. He didn't finish his time in the service and was sent off early after failing one of the tests and being labeled unfit to remain in service. He was told to leave the service or work in a different field. So that's about his childhood, teen, young adult, and career in a nutshell. But there should have been some point where he should have started seeing other women. Well, if you're wondering about his love life as a young adult, here's everything about. It all started with Paula. One could say she is one of the reasons why Lorne set his boundaries that way with women. As we saw earlier, I'm referring to the segment where we heard his voice call with Dan. Let me tell you a little about Paula. She was a pretty woman whom Lorne met during his service. Although the relationship ended way too soon, Paula's presence left a lingering effect on Lorne's mind, and not in a positive way. According to his description, she was pretty, but his romance was shattered as he later found that Lorne wasn't the only guy she was having a physical connection with. Paula unknowingly made Lorne set standards when it comes to women, which also came along with a lot of trust issues. She also seemed to have set a relationship pattern that he follows throughout his life, which you'll soon watch in this video. So remember Paula for future references. In one of the phone calls he had with Winnie, a woman he was seeing, he's mentioned about Paula in detail. He said he thought about getting Paula a ring, but decided to back off since one of his friends talked him out of it. They had been physically intimate only once. Lorne had known for her a year and decided to marry her. Not only did his friend Jim talk him out of it, but he also witnessed Paula cheating on him, so things didn't really go well with them.
You told me you bought a ring for Paula.
No, I said I thought about buying a ring for Paula.
talking to my friend Jim about it that I worked for, that he lived right next door, and he met Paula too, and he talked me out of it.
After his work at the military, he had to find a job to live a stable life, as he was living with his brother and niece during the mid-90s. According to records, he was hired as a laborer at Irving Tanning Company. From the time of hire until 2005, he was not consistent with his job, but kept resigning and joining the company back and forth. Well, this kind of puts me in a spot thinking about the job market back in the 90s. I mean, if you look at it in the course of 10 years approximately, he joined and resigned from the company about 4 times, and that's when the company had decided not to rehire Lorne anymore. It's about time they realized it. After his work at the Irving Tanning Company, Lorne said he sold Kirby vacuums in Olympia, Washington. Do you all still remember those heavy Kirby vacuums they sold that could basically outlive you? Well, let's not stray off topic. Lorne sold them for about 2 to 3 months, not long before he threw in the towel, saying he couldn't do it and was out looking for another job because he was broke. He stated that he was employed by Schneider National in Oregon for approximately 6 months. He was hired as an over-the-road truck driver and was compensated at a rate of 22 cents per mile. Lorne soon quit that company as well, as he didn't seem to enjoy the truck driver lifestyle. He then took up another job at A+ Septic Service in Washington, which was yet another truck driving position that also included some repair work. 2 years later, he quit the job and headed back to Maine, the place he grew up, to start a similar business. Lorne opened his business in Maine, a one-septic service. He says it's a legitimate business, however, he's put the business on hold when he relocated to Tennessee to pursue his singing career. He also stated that he'll continue the business, restore his reputation, and re-establish clients after he's been released from custody. That was all about his work life after high school and his service in the military. But what we haven't talked about yet is his encounter with the familiarity of the internet during the early 2000s. He met a woman named Amanda Jones during that year on the internet. Just like Paula, Amanda Jones also seems to have left a lasting impact on Lorne's life. During this time, he was working for A+ Septic Service in Washington, and Amanda was living in Pennsylvania. So that was when Lorne decided he had to quit and move back to Maine and live closer to Amanda. This was also the same time when he decided to open his own business in Maine. But here's where the twist comes. When Lorne told his sister about Amanda, she was intrigued. They were in a relationship, and Lorne told his sister about Amanda's niece, whom she has custody of. So there came a point when Amanda and Lorne's sister had a conversation over call, and that's when things went downhill. A simple 2-minute talk made Lorne's sister realize that Amanda is actually a catfish, and that Amanda is not even her real name. Amanda's original identity was Leslie, and the niece she claimed to have custody of is not apparently her niece, but her own daughter. She claimed she had custody of the girl because the child's mother was struggling with drug addiction, and her sister-in-law had passed away from breast cancer. Supposedly, she had custody of her niece for 2 years. He also said that he didn't go on a single date in 2 years because of Amanda.
And to tell you why it bothers me is because of fucking Amanda James. Her real name is Leslie, lives in Pennsylvania. She told me her fucking daughter was her niece. She told me she had custody of her niece because her fucking brother was a fucking drug addict, and her sister-in-law died of breast cancer, and she had custody of her niece. For 2 fucking years. I never went on a goddamn date because of that.
So he basically dedicated his time and life during those 2 years to Amanda James he's never met. Well, I suppose Amanda unknowingly saved some women from Lorne during those 2 years. The craziest part is that he still continued to talk to Amanda, or should we just call her Leslie now, even after knowing that she was a catfish. Not only that, he continued to talk to her for another 6 more months. At this point, he was just in need of a woman to talk to. Seems like he was doing it for the love of the game. So far, we know 2 women Lorne has been with, Paula and Leslie, and they both have mistreated Lorne, which definitely seems to have scarred him in ways you're going to watch in this video as we progress. However, so far Lorne sounds like a decent guy. Did his high school, joined the military, worked at different places, and had failed relationships. But this isn't why people despise Lorne. It's what was done to women online. Several women, several awful and nasty stories are the reasons why Lorne's locked up today. So it all started in 2004 when he decided to establish his presence more online to find someone since he was single. In 2004, Lorne decided to go through some country music chat rooms. Here, he didn't find girls of his own age. He simply went up online and started talking to girls. Underage girls. During this time, he was talking to 2 underage girls. Let's call them Chatroom Girl 1 and Chatroom Girl 2 for better understanding. Mind you, he was in his mid-30s when this happened. The conversations with Chatroom Girl 2 happened when she was 16, and he was more or less 34. A grown man who admitted online that he had a romantic interest in a girl less than half his age. However, this did not lead to anything as we started with something mellow. In one of the interviews, Lorne talks about Chatroom Girl 2 and about where he met her.
She was in Maine.
She was in Maine?
Her too. Yeah, she had a lot of problems.
And how did you meet her?
On the internet. She was in a jail room. She was in a country music room or a main room or something like that. It was 16. I think she was 16.
Okay. Okay.
And she was feeling really down about herself when I met her.
Mhm.
But nobody wanted her. And she kept saying she was ugly and all that. And she showed me a picture of her, and I told her I said, "You're not ugly." I said, "You're a beautiful girl." I said, "And there's some boy there at school that likes you. They're just probably too shy to say it."
Mhm.
I remember I said that to her. And we just became friends from there.
He said she was 16 and was going through a rough phase in her life. According to him, she felt really insecure about herself. He claims she told him that people at school called her ugly and that no one wanted her. He says she sent him a picture and he remembers telling her she wasn't ugly at all, that she was beautiful, and that there was probably some boy at school who liked her but just didn't have the courage to say it. From there, he describes their relationship as becoming a friendship. He insists there wasn't anything between them. In fact, he anticipates the obvious question. If he felt romantic toward her, why didn't it turn into something more? His answer is simple. They were just friends. But at the same time, he admits he wasn't the same person back then either. Well, their friendship just didn't end there, though. That is until about 3 years later, Chatroom Girl 2 showed up at his trailer one random day. According to him, she didn't come alone. She brought a friend. The two of them allegedly sat around for a while with him and one of his friends, both of whom were drunk at the time. After that visit, communication between them slowly faded. He confirms that he did meet her in person. He says she came over multiple times, around 19 years old at the time, and that they had been talking online for about 2 to 3 years before she ever showed up at his place.
Ever meet her?
I did.
Okay.
Her and her friend came over to meet me when I was there. It was actually
Came over to your...
over to my house.
They went to your
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, but I think she was like 19 at the time that she came over.
So you talked to her for 2 years?
I think I talked to her 3 years, I think.
When asked what happened during those visits, he insists nothing significant occurred. He claims they mostly just sat around, talked for a bit, and then she and her friend left. He says she once brought a girlfriend with her, and again everyone just talked. He maintains that while he and his friend were drinking, the girls were not.
When she ended up coming over to your house,
Yeah,
what happened there?
I was drunk. We were drunk. She had a pregnant girlfriend with her, and we just talked.
Didn't you get drunk too?
No.
Oh, she didn't. The two boys were drunk and that was it.
Yeah.
According to him, her visit wasn't even planned. He says he had previously given her his address, telling her she could come by if she ever wanted to. One day, she simply showed up. At that time, he says they were still in contact, though not heavily, and not long after that, she reportedly moved away, possibly to Wisconsin or Montana.
So what made you want her to come over that night?
I didn't even know that she was coming over that night.
How did that happen then?
Her and her friend showed up.
Oh, you had given her your address
My
before?
address, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I told her if she ever wanted to come over, then she could. I gave her my address,
Okay.
and I guess she wrote it down.
And she just showed up one day, but you guys were still talking at that point.
Yeah, we were still talking at that point. We didn't talk much after that because it wasn't long after that she moved out to Wisconsin or Montana, somewhere out there.
As for how he felt when she came over, he describes it as awkward. He says he didn't expect her to actually show up, especially with him already intoxicated. He recalls that they exchanged a brief hug, the kind you'd give a friend, and that was about it.
And then what were you feeling when she came over? I mean, did you want to kiss her or something? Like, you had
No, I just
already
gave her a
had
hug.
these... Okay.
I gave her a hug, she gave me a hug. I even gave her a friend a hug.
Okay.
But I felt awkward because I didn't know if she was going to show up, and me and we were drunk.
And that was what went down with Chatroom Girl, too. If you find this alarming, just wait for Chatroom Girl 1's story, and things are just about to get worse from now on. When Lorne was talking to Chatroom Girl 1, she was only 15 years old, and this dude was pushing his 30s. The age gap alone was something so creepy as we skim through this case, because let's put it out there plainly. In no world is there a reason for a grown man to be having a friendship of any kind with a girl half his age, and yet, here we are, witnessing Lorne shamelessly talking to a little girl. No law could justify this interaction as legal in any way otherwise.
How did you become friends with her?
I met her on the country music chat room. She was from Maine. They had country music chat rooms for every state. You go to different states, and they have country music chat rooms in every state.
He also met her in a country music chat room. Myspace was quite popular during the early 2000s. There were even state-specific ones. Maine had its own, and so did other states. You could hop from one to another, talking about music, artists, or just life in general. He says she was from Maine, and that's how the initial connection formed. From there on, things apparently moved quite quickly. After talking for what he describes as a brief period of time, the two of them began referring to each other as boyfriend and girlfriend. When interrogated about his interaction with an underage girl and claiming her to be his girlfriend, he starts to shift the time frame slightly. He says she was 15 when he met her, but 19 the last time he spoke to her.
Lorne, you were friends with the little girl on MySpace?
Well, she was 15 when I met her. She was 19 last time I talked to her. This is when I got incarcerated. Before that.
That distinction clearly matters to him, but the beginning of the relationship, the part that stands out, started when she was still a minor. When asked how exactly they became friends, he says they bonded over music. He sang, apparently, and she liked his singing. She was a big Kenny Chesney fan, and he would sing songs she liked. That was the hook, at least according to him. Music brought them together. It started casually, but at some point early on, the conversation turned toward trying to be boyfriend and girlfriend.
I'm just curious how the boyfriend and girlfriend situation came up between the two of you.
That was just at the beginning.
How did that start?
Well, we started talking. It wasn't the first night. I don't remember exactly when, but I sang, and she liked my singing, and she's asshole ticket of like Kenny Chesney. I used to sing songs that she liked. Because she liked Kenny Chesney.
He insists it wasn't immediate, as if that's supposed to make it any better. He claims it didn't happen right off the bat, but it did happen, and that's the key detail. A 32-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl are discussing being in a romantic relationship. When pressed about whether he told her he loved her during that time, he says not at first, but he doesn't deny that emotional language may have developed later. He tries to frame the relationship as different from other situations he's been questioned about. He says she talked to him about her real-life boyfriend, about her family, about her problems. According to him, she confided in him. He describes himself as someone she would go to when she was upset. Sounds like the textbook definition of to me. Being an adult, he strategically positioned himself as a supportive figure, a friend, and as someone who gave her a shoulder when she was upset. As a young girl, it would definitely seem comforting, but it is clearly Lorne taking advantage of her innocence. He claims himself to be a friend, but at the same time he acknowledges they were attempting to be boyfriend and girlfriend at the beginning, which certainly sounds contradictory. He argues that the conversations were completely different from other interactions he's had. He says this wasn't some shallow exchange. She had a life. She had real things going on. She talked about school, family issues, and relationship problems. He claims it wasn't just fantasy or role play, that she was a real girl with real experiences. According to him, the relationship lasted about 4 months in a romantic sense, but they continued talking for years, roughly 4 years in total if his timeline is accurate. He describes himself as a good friend to her over that period, and eventually they planned to see each other in person. Near the end of the first year they had been talking, the two of them decided they wanted to see each other in person. Not meet up in the traditional sense, at least that's how he describes it.
In the first year that we met. It was like towards the end of the first year that we met. Tried to see each other, but I went up to see her, but I brought somebody with me.
According to Lauren, there was a state fair happening near her hometown. The idea wasn't to hang out. It wasn't to talk face-to-face. It wasn't even to interact physically. So he said this quote-unquote, we weren't even going to touch each other.
Well, there was supposed to be some fair going on or something like that. We weren't even going to meet. We just wanted to see each other. We weren't even going to touch each other or nothing. We're just going to see each other because we both wanted to know that we both existed.
The plan, as he explains it, was simply to verify each other's existence. They were going to go to the same fair, be in the same general area, and just look at each other from a distance. No touching, no conversation. Just confirmation that the person on the other side of the screen was real. He says he even brought someone with him. In his telling, that detail is meant to show there was nothing secretive or predatory about the situation. He claims it was mutual that she wanted to see him just as much as he wanted to see her. People obviously have their questions about how creepy it is for a man in his 30s to meet a little girl half his age. However, he pushes back on that interpretation. He insists it was mutual. He says they both wanted to confirm the other was real. In his mind, it was about reassurance, about proving neither of them was being deceived online. He labels it as caring. He says they cared about each other at the time. That's the word he keeps returning to, care, as if that alone justifies the situation.
Just because we cared about each other. At the time, we cared about each other. And we wanted to see that the other one was real.
Did she have concerns that you weren't real?
She had concerns at the same time that I did. My concern was because of what happened with Amanda James.
So after months of online communication, both Lorne and Chatroom Girl 1 had lingering doubts about each other's authenticity. She worried he might not be who he claimed to be, and he worried the same, partly because of a prior experience with Amanda James, aka Leslie, as we discussed earlier. To settle things, Lorne decided to make a trip to verify her existence in person. He brought along his friend Tony as a witness, a safeguard for his own protection. They drove 3.5 hours to the state fair near her hometown, a public place chosen deliberately for safety. The idea, according to him, wasn't to meet face-to-face in a private setting or do anything inappropriate. It was to confirm that the person he had been talking to online was real, and to have a trusted friend present in case any questions arose later about his presence. The plan, however, did not go smoothly. Chatroom Girl 1 got the date wrong. Lorne and Tony arrived a day before the fair was actually scheduled to take place. Since Lorne had to work the next day, he couldn't extend his stay, and as a result, the two of them never actually met in person during this trip.
Stop. What happened?
I didn't see her.
Oh, she wasn't there?
No, she said the fair was supposed to be one day, but she got that day wrong. She asked me if I could stay another day, and I said no. I said I gotta work, so I never got to see her.
Oh, okay.
Despite the misstep, Tony reportedly spoke to her briefly on the phone during their visit. Tony had described her as a very nice and sincere person, someone who seemed honest and sensitive, but he also advised that Lorne should wait until she was 18 before pursuing any kind of relationship with her. Tony believed it would be safer and more appropriate to delay any in-person contact or a deeper involvement.
Okay.
Tony was the one that went with me. Tony thought that I should be waiting to talk to her until she was 18, but then he said that she seems like a nice person to be friends with. But he did say that he thought that I still should wait until she's 18 to talk to her, or to meet her.
Okay.
Not to talk to her, but to meet her.
Lorne claims that both he and Chatroom Girl 1 were actually aware of each other's ages at that time, and that is again not something one could use to justify pedophilia. Lorne claims that Tony's advice played a critical role in shaping the boundaries they would observe going forward. After the attempted meetup and the phone conversation, Lorne and Chatroom Girl 1 reportedly discussed the situation and agreed to wait until she was of legal age and out of high school before trying to meet again. The plan was to maintain a friendship while adhering to those boundaries. Over the next 3 years, from around 2004 to 2007, they continued communicating online. Lorne moved to Nashville during this period, and there were plans for her to visit him there after she graduated.
After she graduated, she was going to come out to Nashville.
Okay.
We had strong feelings for each other.
What does that mean?
Meaning, she was 18 when this was wrong, but when I was down in Nashville, she was going to come down to Nashville to see me, and we were going to try something then.
However, those plans never came true. Their online communication began to narrow down in the early September of 2007 and completely stopped by October the 18th of that year. During this period, the relationship remained entirely digital. The attempted in-person meeting and Tony's intervention seemed to mark a turning point in their interactions. While they had originally intended to meet at the state fair to verify each other's existence, the failure of that attempt, combined with the advice to wait until she was of age, kept the relationship constrained to online communication. Despite these boundaries, Lorne continued to describe her as sincere, honest, and sensitive. She was reportedly someone who confided in him about her life, her family, and her struggles. Even when advice was given to maintain distance, the digital friendship persisted for several years.
She was your girlfriend at some point?
No.
Okay. So then what was the stuff?
What was what?
What was stuff? You said there wasn't a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we just talked a little bit. I showed myself to her a time or two.
When you were
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Is that while you guys were talking about stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
At no point during this time did Lorne claim that any inappropriate interaction took place. The friendship remained primarily about checking in, chatting, and maintaining a connection across the digital space. Both parties seemed to understand and then accept the boundaries set by Tony's guidance and their mutual acknowledgement of age and circumstance. Well, you'd be wrong if you thought the conversations were just going on between the two underage girls and him, because during this time, Lorne was also in communication with another individual, referred to here as Kayla. While he spoke to Kayla occasionally, the interactions were limited compared to his ongoing communication with Chatroom Girl 1. The plan for her to visit was framed as a casual trip, not a romantic meeting, but rather an opportunity to see and verify each other's existence after years of online conversation. At this stage, there was no official boyfriend and girlfriend status. Any romantic label had faded over time, replaced by the uncertainty of trying to know each other better and navigating the complexities of an online relationship transitioning toward real-world contact. Even though they both had reportedly had strong feelings for each other, the interactions remained largely largely controlled and careful. Lorne has publicly claimed that he had romantic feelings for these young girls, and on multiple occasions engaged explicit conversations with them. He also admitted to showing himself to at least one of the girls while nude, though he framed these interactions as limited. The nature of these communications illustrates the dangerous imbalance in these relationships and highlights why they are concerning when considering the ages involved. Meanwhile, Lorne's online communications continued with Chatroom Girl 1. This was before they stopped talking in 2007. This was only the beginning of his relationship ordeal. There's more to go. The next one is one of the most important parts of the timeline. This happened in 2006 between a married couple, Betty and her husband Eric. Betty and Eric were an ordinary couple who lived in Rhode Island, and just like that, they decided they'd move to rural Maine for quite a more peaceful life. Well, that's where Lorne also lived at that time, as we know, and that's pretty much the beginning of the story. Initially, they moved their mobile home onto the property, intending to build a permanent house around it. As is often the case with construction projects, especially DIY heavy ones, the process quickly became complicated. Multiple workers were scheduled for different tasks, materials were ordered, and delays piled up, creating what Betty later described as a construction hell. The plan was ambitious, but simple in theory. They moved their mobile home into a large piece of land in Maine, with the intention of building a permanent house around it. The mobile home would serve as their temporary living space, while the construction slowly took shape. It was practical, it was cost-effective, and it seemed manageable. Well, at least it sounded like it was doable. However, things didn't remain the same. Construction projects have a way of testing patience, and this one was no exception. Lumber had already been ordered, roof trusses were delivered, materials were sitting on the property, ready to be used. There was a contractor involved, the same man who had moved the mobile home onto the site. He had experience. He had agreed to do the job, but he also had other commitments. He had other irons in the fire, other projects, other responsibilities, and as weeks passed, it became clear he simply didn't have the time to dedicate to Betty and Eric's build. Progress slowed to a crawl. Materials sat untouched. November crept in, and with it came the cold Maine weather, and we know how cold it can get in Maine and the other regions around it. At one point, someone did come in and at least close up the skirting around the mobile home so the pipes wouldn't freeze. That much got done, but that was about it. The larger structure, the real house, it wasn't moving forward. They were stuck in what can only be described as construction limbo. The couple needed help to manage the project, particularly for smaller tasks like hooking up a washing machine. After searching through the yellow pages, Betty found a local business called A One Septic Service and Construction. While the name sounded generic, it was local, convenient, and seemed capable of assisting with minor construction and installation tasks. What they didn't initially know was that the business was owned and operated by Lorne Armstrong. Lorne came to hook up their washing machine, and during the process, he struck up a conversation with Betty and Eric. He described himself as an experienced construction worker who had built houses before and seemed outgoing and easy to talk to. He was personable, chatty, and appeared confident in his abilities. He explained that he had experience managing construction projects, but had been too busy with other commitments to take on large jobs recently. Betty and Eric, impressed by his credentials and approachable nature, decided to hire him to help with the ongoing construction of their home. Lorne's initial involvement began quite casually. He was supposed to hook up the washing machine, but through conversation, he positioned himself as someone capable of handling larger portions of the project. He presented himself as a capable, reliable worker, and the couple, frustrated with delays from other contractors, welcomed the assistance. Over time, Lorne became more involved in the property, gradually taking on a more central role in the construction process. However, as he became more involved in the project, tasks that were supposed to be completed by other workers dragged on, materials were not installed as planned, and the pace of construction slowed. Lorne's presence, while initially helpful, eventually became a source of strain for Betty and Eric as they struggled to manage expectations, schedules, and outcomes. While waiting for the original contractor to clear his schedule, which never seemed to happen, Betty and Eric ran to another issue. A smaller one, but still important. They needed their new washing machine hooked up. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but for Betty, it was. For years while living in Rhode Island near a lake, she had been without her own washer and dryer. She'd been making regular trips to the laundromat, so when they finally ordered a brand new LG washer set up for their new life in Maine, it felt like a milestone. A small luxury, a symbol that they were finally settling in. They flipped open the yellow pages, and that's when they found a business called A One Septic Services and Construction. And of course, the guy who answered the couple's call was Lorne Armstrong. He swung by their property to install the washer. The job was straightforward. But while he was there, something else happened. He started talking, and he went on and on about a lot of things. Lorne, in general, was quite an outgoing man and a big chatter, at least according to how Betty described him during one of the instances. He struck up a conversation easily. He seemed comfortable, personable, likable enough. The kind of guy who could hold a conversation without awkward pauses.
Okay.
In the process of talking to him, because he was an outgoing person, he chatted very easily.
Yeah.
Seemed to be a likable enough person.
He was quite a prolific chatter, you might say.
Prolific chatter. You know what? I almost said that, and they said, no, I'm not going to say that. But yes, he was a prolific chatter.
Yeah.
During the installation, Betty mentioned the frustrations they've been having with their build, the delays, the contractor who couldn't commit, the materials just sat there while winter approached. That's when Lorne inserted himself into the bigger picture. He casually mentioned that construction was actually his background. He had built houses before, he said. He knew the work. He did septic and other jobs on the side. But construction, that was something he understood well. After he left, Betty and Eric talked it over. The original contractor had already admitted he was stretched thin. He had too much going on. He couldn't give them the time they needed. Winter was closing in, and they couldn't afford to keep waiting. So they made their decision. They called the original guy, confirmed he wouldn't be able to prioritize their project, and mutually agreed to part ways, and decided to hire Lorne. It started simply enough. He had materials to work with, lumber already delivered, roof trusses stacked and waiting. The groundwork had been laid. In theory, all he had to do was pick up where the previous contractor left off. But what Betty and Eric didn't know at the time was that this decision would entangle them in something far more complicated than delayed construction. When Betty told others that Lorne had their construction project done, she didn't get a very nice reply, for obvious reasons. Betty was new in town, and people weren't giving her a lot of info on what kind of guy Lorne was. Lorne was probably not the best guy, but he was surprisingly good at making a good first impression, and he did with Betty and Eric. Given the fact that Lorne strategically gained the couple's trust, the chances of them actually trusting other people's take on this are quite slim if you ask them, so they simply just rolled with it.
A couple of occasions when we told a couple of people in the area who was working on our house. One man said, well, first he rolled his eyes. That was a giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of went, which was another giveaway. And then he said, I said to him, what? Nothing. No, really, what? What? Is there something we should know?
Yeah.
He said, well, just watch him.
Regardless, the job moves forward anyway. Lorne shows up with his crew, which consists of his brother Paul and a friend named Tony. 3 grown men on a job that's supposed to cost $60,000. Right away, the dynamic feels off. Instead of a well-organized construction team, it's more like 3 guys figuring things out as they go. One of them cuts a single board, while the other 2 stand around watching, smoking cigarettes. There's no urgency, no coordination, just a lot of standing around. Then comes the lumber order. Betty, trying to stay on top of things, calls the building supply store with the materials list Lorne provided. She reads it off to the employee on the other end. The man pauses and asks, what are you doing with this? She explains it's for a roof on a new addition. That's when he drops the bomb. Lady, he tells her, it's going to rain in your house.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the list in front of me, and I read it to the man at the lumber store, at the building store, and he said to me, what are you doing with this stuff?
Yeah.
We're putting an addition on our home, our mobile home, and this is for the addition. This is for the roof. He said, lady, it's going to rain in your house.
The materials Lorne ordered weren't suitable for what he was building. Instead of water and ice shield insulation, something designed to prevent moisture damage, he ordered a basic type that would absorb water like a sponge. According to the employee, once it started soaking up moisture, it would keep absorbing until it became so heavy it would rip loose and crash through the ceiling. For context, that is no ordinary mistake. Betty goes outside and asks the crew point blank if they've ever done this kind of work before. One of them admits he once put a roof on his uncle's barn. Not exactly reassuring when you're paying tens of thousands of dollars for a residential addition. And about that money, Lorne asked for half up front, $30,000. That's not unheard of in construction. Deposits happen. But then, not long after receiving the $30,000, Lorne asked for another $10,000, and Betty straight up refuses.
He wanted, it was going to cost us $60,000. He wanted half up front. That's business.
Right.
That does happen.
Right.
That's not unusual.
Right. So
he got it. But then he wanted another $10,000. And I said, no. What did you do with the money that we already had? Well, I paid my workers, but they didn't do anything. He says, well, I trust them. And I said, well, I don't. I don't even know them.
When she asks what happened to the first $30,000, Lorne claims he paid his workers. That's a fair reason, but the work, however, wasn't half done. The visible progress on the house doesn't match the amount of money that's supposedly been spent. When Betty pushes back, Lorne says he trusts his crew. Betty's response is simple. She doesn't. She doesn't even know them. As the construction situation spirals, something even more devastating happens. Eric suffers a stroke. Not long after that, he had a heart attack. Suddenly, the house project becomes secondary to something far more serious. Survival. Eric spends extended time in the hospital. There are emergency procedures, including a defibrillator and a pacemaker. There's speech therapy. There are hospital transfers between facilities in Maine. For most of 2007, it's a cycle of hospital stays and recovery attempts. The stress is overwhelming. Betty is juggling everything, caring for Eric, managing animals at home, and dealing with a half-destroyed construction project that's bleeding money. Meanwhile, the work on the house slows, and eventually ceases to progress. After being confronted about the money and the shoddy work, Lorne and his crew simply stop showing up. They did not give the couple a heads up of any sort. They disappeared. January 4th, 2007 marks the last day he ever works on that house. Betty tries to contact him. She reaches out to the district attorney's office. There's mediation. A mediator named Ian McKinnon gets involved. Lorne agrees, on record, to pay back $20,000. Mind you, that's not the full amount, but a merely reduced figure. He not only promised to give her half the amount, but also he did not promise that he'd actually get the work done. His work wasn't worth the originally paid amount either. In simpler terms, he just warmed the seats and got paid for it. Over the next several months, there are phone calls. At times, Lorne calls Betty crying, saying he feels ashamed, saying he's going to make it right. He talks about repayment plans. He makes emotional appeals. But the money never comes back in full, not even close. After about 5 months of pressure and follow-ups, Lorne does what he's going to make a pattern in his life. He runs. He leaves Maine and moves to Nashville.
It wasn't like we didn't try. We went to the DA's office. The DA contacted. They have a mediator. The man's name was Ian McKinnon. He told Mr. McKinnon that he definitely would pay us back. We agreed to take only $20,000. Pay it back. We were giving him a break because he didn't have no way did he do $20,000 worth of work.
Yeah.
And he said he would, and of course he did not.
Now, according to Lorne, this move is about chasing a dream. He claims he wants to pursue a country music career. He says he wasn't in the right frame of mind back home. He puts his septic company on hold. He sells his house for just $8,000, even though he reportedly had around $50,000 invested in it. He loses his truck to a mechanic. The truck story's another mess. Lorne takes it to a mechanic for repairs. The mechanic finishes the work and asks for payment. Lorne says he doesn't have the money, but offers to trade personal items like a television instead. The mechanic isn't having it. He knows who Lorne is. He keeps the vehicle. That's pretty much how Lorne's life in Maine collapsed. Not only that, but also how he scammed the couple new in town of $30,000 and fled town. So far, he's dated young girls, scammed the couple, and fled town. But if you think that's all he did, you'd be wrong. Remember how we initially discussed how he packed his bags and left for Nashville from Maine to create a singing career? Well, now that we know the actual reason behind his fleeing town. So what was he doing in Nashville, besides the fact that Betty was still in search of him, and he had no choice but to find a job in Nashville to support his living? He did end up finding a random desk job, but he ended up quitting it soon because he didn't enjoy his job. Also during this time, he was in contact with 4 different girls. Well, girls to him. However, they were perverted justice decoys in reality. Decoy 1, Kimmy Kimmy Coco Bop. Decoy 2, Disney Girl _13. Decoy 3, TD a Pet 13. Decoy 4, the important one, Kayla _Princess 94. The reason why I say Kayla _Princess 94 is an important one out of all the other decoys is that the conversations with the other decoys did not generally last very long. However, Kayla _Princess 94, aka Kayla, lasted longer. And the longer it lasted, the nastier and creepier the conversations became. Also, Lorne seemed to be attached to Kayla the best, which explains the longer conversation part. The conversations that he had with Kayla will have you questioning if he actually was in love with Kayla, because the conversations get quite deep after a certain point, and you'll get to see it in just a bit. For context, during this time, 2007, Facebook was getting very popular. The more popular it got, the higher the number of predators became. So to eradicate potential predators online, the government and NBC decided to air a crime investigation and formatted show to catch predators. Adults who believed they were communicating online with underage children were invited to a house for a supposed meetup. What they didn't know was that the child was actually a decoy. The house was wired with cameras, and law enforcement officers were waiting nearby. One of the most infamous cases to come out of the series was the sting involving Lorne Armstrong. It was a part with the highest recorded viewership during that time. To understand the sting operation, it helps to understand how the show worked. The producers collaborated with local police departments and online watchdog groups. Adults posing as minors entered chat rooms and social platforms that were commonly used at the time. These decoys adopted the personas of children, often between 12 and 15 years old. Their profiles were intentionally clear about their age. There was no ambiguity. When adult users initiated conversations, the chats were documented. If the conversations turned explicit or suggestive, and if the adult attempted to arrange a physical meeting, law enforcement began building a case. Everything was logged. Every message, every explicit request, every plan to meet. Once a meetup was arranged, the adult suspect would be given the address of a house set up by the production team. Inside the home, hidden cameras were placed throughout the living room, kitchen, and entryway. A young-looking decoy, sometimes an adult actor, sometimes a teenage-looking staff member, would briefly greet the suspect at the door. They might say something casual like, "Hey, come on in," or "I made some cookies," just enough to establish that the suspect had shown up expecting to meet a minor. And then came the moment that made the show famous. Journalist Chris Hansen would walk into the room, and this was exactly what happened with Lorne Armstrong as well. Lorne's first encounter with Kayla happened in September 2007, when a 36-year-old man from Maine entered a Yahoo chat room. It started as a simple conversation, but things became so gross. Within the chat room, Lorne came across a profile under the name Kayla Marie Armstrong. The profile was explicit, and the girl was only 13 years old, a minor, legally protected, and far too young to be interacting with an adult in any personal or intimate capacity. Instead of disengaging, Lorne made a conscious choice to continue the conversation. At first, the dialogue seemed harmless. Casual greetings, small talk, and shared interests were exchanged, much like any typical online interaction might begin. But once he confirmed her age, conversation took a rapid and troubling turn. Within hours, Lorne began to exhibit what investigators later identified as behavior. He started by complimenting her appearance, calling her pretty and beautiful. On the surface, these words might seem innocent, but in context, they were carefully calculated to make a child feel special, seen, and emotionally validated, a foundational step in manipulative control. He then told her she seemed mature for her age. This comment was far from harmless. By implying that she possessed a level of maturity beyond her years, he was subtly blurring the boundary between childhood and adulthood, conditioning her to accept attention from an adult as normal or flattering. At the same time, Lorne began probing her home life, asking about her parents and whether they were often home. These questions were strategic, designed to assess supervision and vulnerability, and to identify moments when he could interact with her without interference. Within the span of a single day, what began as casual online chatting had shifted into a calculated attempt to build trust, create dependency, and manipulate a minor. Each compliment, each question, and each seemingly innocuous comment was part of a carefully constructed process aimed at slowly lowering a child's defenses. This initial contact illustrates a chilling truth. Predators often operate subtly in digital spaces. They do not immediately reveal their intentions. Instead, they employ charm, flattery, and casual conversation to manipulate, making their approach appear normal and harmless, all while laying the groundwork for more serious exploitation. The initial texts were simply him introducing himself, talking about his niece, and more. However, even during that, he explicitly asked her age, to which she replied she was 13, for which he just said, "Wow, you're just a young one, huh?" Eventually, they saw that they each other's pictures, and he complimented, "Look at these big blue eyes. You're so cute, LOL." Mind you, he was talking to a 13-year-old, and in no world is there a need for a grown man pushing 40 to be complimenting a girl who's nothing but 13. He then proceeds to ask if she has boys going crazy for her at school, and this is what he said word to word, "I bet all the boys are after you at your school, huh? LOL." And he also proceeded to say, "I find it hard to believe that the boys at your school aren't all after you. You're a little doll." If that isn't already creepy, he also added that he'd also be into her too if she were just 5 years older. "If only you were like 5 years older, I'd be after you too, lol."